Eat it. Oxygen. Why we
Don't forget to follow Grit Daily News as well as me, your host, Loralyn Mears, everywhere on social media. And how about throwing 4 or 5 stars our way if you're listening to Apple or Spotify? Subscribe to our show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grit Daily Grit Files podcast. I'm your host, Loralyn Mears, and in the house today we've got David Lokshin. And if you're thinking, why does this sound familiar? Well, he has built an incredible platform called Trace, which brings a whole level of personalization to youth coaching. So none of this, go look for film through hours and hours of film and some practice or something, but zero in on that one particular athlete, zero in on what changes could potentially be made to improve that athlete's game. And that's really what it's all about. But I'm going to let David talk to us in his own words. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, talk to us about this. I mean, personalization is kind of the way of the future in just about every industry, and why not on athletics coaching? So talk to us about what Trace is. Talk to us about this platform.
We make it really easy for players, parents, and coaches to get individualized moments for youth sports. So instead of having to go through the entire game, I can just go through and watch what David did. You can go through and watch what you did. And that's without any sort of editing. That's without any sort of filming. You just play the game as a player. You just watch the game as a parent. And a couple hours later, you get results that are individualized for every single player on the field.
Oh, that's absolutely incredible. So talk to us about the impetus behind your journey. I mean, people don't just wake up and go, hey, I'm tired of looking through all of this footage and watching all these other players play. I only want to watch my kid or whatever. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I don't have this great founder story. It was actually an accident. I never meant to start a company. My co-founder never meant to start a company. I was in finance. That's where I started. And I've always had side projects. And this was a side project that I guess grew a little bit out of control. And really the aha moment was we were originally in action sports, and we had written some software to automatically edit GoPro footage. And I remember going surfing, and it's, a 2-hour session. And the wave that you caught that you really want to watch is 15 seconds. And we just ran the program and it spit out my wave, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to think about it. And I just saw myself, and we really thought, oh my gosh, what if your entire life was like this? You could just sort of walk around the world. You wouldn't have to take out your phone. You wouldn't have to buy a camera, any of these things. You were just sent memories of the thing that you were doing. And that's the impetus of how it started. And it sort of evolved from there. And here we are today.
Oh, another great innovation, fresh from the waves, right? Fantastic as a surfer. I mean, I'm thinking like, well, tech and surfing, and usually don't put those two things together, other than, of course, the dynamics of the board. But this is really cool. Now, talk to us a little bit about having a co-founder. So was he or she or they immediately involved? Did you have to convince them? Because you said the other person really wasn't thinking about starting a company at the time.
Yeah, so my co-founder is actually my dad. So we've had side projects forever, and he had retired. So he had been at Magellan Navigation. He was one of the early engineers there, became CTO, and basically built consumer GPS, and had retired. And I was working for a hedge fund at the time and sort of started this side project. And I think the family bond, certainly we both wanted it to succeed. And every time it grew a little bit more, we got tied into the company a little bit more. And neither one of us really ever meant to start a company. It was working on these side projects that end up coming to fruition.
In over 100 podcasts across 3 seasons, you are the second parent-child company that's been founded. So really cool. Talk to us about what that's like. I mean, it's really hard, I think, to have that separation between what is family and what is business. And of course, there may be tensions and things rising. And then you've got to maybe sit down and have dinner again together and go through that and leave all that stuff behind. Let our audience know how those experiences have been.
Yeah, I think about it from the other side. Everyone always asks me, what's it like working with your dad? I get into arguments with my mom all the time. I get into arguments with my dad all the time. And my response to them is, do you think that co-founders don't get into arguments all the time? That's a very natural part of starting a company. Co-founders argue all the time. There's some really hairy decisions that you're going to disagree on. There's some really difficult times, and people handle stress differently. Sometimes he handles it better than I do, sometimes the reverse. But the thing that the family piece gives is that I don't have to worry about trusting him. I know that he has my best intentions at heart. He knows that I have his best intentions at heart. And I never have to think in the back of my mind, what's his real motivation here? What's really going on? Never had to do that. And we've had so many times where Trace almost died, or we had some problems that we had to overcome. And that bond and that trust was never in question. And I actually think it makes it easier. I think of it, having gone through this experience, how could you start a company with someone that you don't know as well as I know my dad? Literally none. He's the first person who's ever seen me in the world. And I've never founded a company with someone else, but I think of it from the reverse. Just the amount of trust that we have for each other just makes running the company so much easier.
As a founder myself, I'd have to agree with that. The person that I originally intended to found Steeris with, he was interested, and then of course life dynamics, personal situations, all this sort of stuff. So I had to find a new team to go with. And it takes time. You've got to build all of that trust, all of those relationships. You don't know where that edge is, where creative tension versus argument versus, competing agendas, all of that sort of stuff. And I think it has slowed down our progress, but I'm really lucky. Like, we have an incredible team now, and we are just like getting it done. But it certainly was harder. So I'll agree with that. You've mentioned a couple of times that I think that this is natural in an entrepreneur's journey, that there's ups and downs, right? Like, it's not all bros and Lambos that everybody thinks. What do you want to share with our audience that you're comfortable sharing about some of those hard times and how you got through them?
There's so many, and some of them are really big and existential. Like, are we going to have enough money to make payroll? And there are others where something goes wrong and you just think to yourself, is this ever going to work out? Is it going to be worth it? I think at Trace, something that's very unique to us is we love problems. We say all the time at Trace, we run at problems. We try and identify problems, and we run at them. We celebrate them when they're solved. And a lot of people who join Trace tell me things like, I've never heard a company or never been in a company that talked about problems so openly and so often. And what we've essentially done is though that's really what company building is. It's running from problem to problem and the problems get bigger as you grow bigger and have more success. And what we've really done at Trace is we found people who love solving them, aren't afraid of them. And we've built a culture around running at problems and solving them, not being afraid of them. And when that becomes the job and that becomes what you celebrate, it doesn't feel like as much of a grind. It feels like an adventure. Here's this new hairy problem that I get to solve. I get to learn, I get to grow. And having that sort of structure and culture and value inside the company, I think just makes all of those speed bumps and hiccups that much easier, because you know that you have a team that you're solving them with, and you know that you have a culture that really embraces it.
What can you share about timelines? We hear all the time that as each generation gets younger, they are progressively interested in things getting done faster, right? Everybody else that's a little bit older, it's like, yeah, we know these things take time, right? We're a little savvier, all of this. What do you think when people like in your organization say, like, why isn't this done yet? Why aren't we all gazillionaires? How do you address all of that?
Yeah, Trace is not your usual startup. So from the day that we wrote the first code to us having our first $1 million year, it was probably like 9 years in the making. So we sort of toiled away in obscurity for 9 years. We were just very firmly believed in the problem. Some of our engineers have been with us for 8-9 years for that whole journey. And it was just very obvious to a small group of us that this idea was really good. And then all of a sudden, we hit our first $1 million year, and within 24 months, we were banging on the door of a $10 million year. And so it happened very fast from there. But we've always been, the way we think about it is we say, pretend you're having a discussion on expectations and you get to sit on the other side, the one demanding expectations, right? And you sit on the other side of the desk and you demand outrageous expectations. Now you get up, you walk around the desk, you sit down, and you execute against those ridiculous expectations. And again, I think it just comes back to culture and values. If you build that sort of culture, if you bring people into the company who believe in that and vibe with that, then it just makes the work much, much easier, because the pain is something you're going to have to tolerate anyway as the company grows and as you have success and as you have problems. And having people who aren't afraid of tolerating that pain makes it fun and makes it much easier to sustain.
Now, when you talk about these challenges and things, and I love that visual of sit on this side of the desk, come up with outrageous expectations, sit on the other side and say, okay, now what am I going to do this? That's, I think, fantastic. I'm going to actually leverage that, but I will give you credit for it.
Thank you.
When you've gone through these challenges, a lot's changed. Sounds like it's been a decade plus in the making. How have you changed, David, through this journey?
Wow, that's a really good question. I haven't thought about that even for a second. Ironically, I think that I have changed to be more impatient. The thing that's really nice about Trace, and the part that I love, is the team. And we're all missionaries, we're not mercenaries. Our vision is for Trace to be the keeper and creator of memories. And so when you don't care about the other stuff, and what you really care about is seeing that vision through and executing on it, you just can't wait for it to actually happen. We have all of these ideas in terms of product. We have all of these ideas in terms of how the world is going to look and how Trace is going to play a role in it. And I think we've all, as a team, become very impatient in seeing that world true. It's so obviously a good idea. It seems so obvious that it's going to happen. Why can't it happen tomorrow? Why is it taking so long? And obviously it's accelerating as we grow and then we have more success and are able to hire more great people and the like. But I think internally as a group, not just myself, but the company has become more impatient, because as we have more success, we're starting to taste it. We're starting to feel it. And it's becoming even more obvious that this is a good idea. Before, it was a good idea and it was a pie in the sky idea. Now it's a good idea and it's being executed. Hundreds of thousands of people are using it, paying for it. And I think as a whole, and certainly myself individually, I've just become more impatient to see it through. Before, it kind of felt like we were too early and maybe some patience was needed. And now it's just all gas, no brakes, let's go.
It's hard being a first mover to market. And how do people engage with your platform? So does a parent just sign up and say, here's the footage of my kid, filter it out? Or how does it really work?
Yeah, so we sign up a team and the team uses it. And then what's very different about Trace is if you think about video in general, the way it works is someone puts up a camera and then you get video of your child, I get video of my child, but we're all starting in the same place, right? We start when the ball gets kicked off and we're sort of choosing our own adventure as we go with the tools on the platform. That's not how Trace starts. When the camera goes up, we are sending different video to each person. So you are getting video and you're starting with your daughter. I'm getting video and I'm starting with my daughter, right? We're starting in different places. We're watching different parts of the game. We're watching different parts of the video. We're sharing different pieces of it. And so Trace is very different in that regard. There isn't really an analog that people are used to. People are used to turning on the TV and watching a game linearly, or getting video of their son or daughter's game and watching it linearly. And that's not how Trace works at all, right? It's broken into little chunks of time where you just get to watch what you care about. You get to watch your child. I get to watch my son. My son's Ethan. I just get to focus on Ethan. I don't care about the other kids on the team. That's sort of harsh to say, but that's where I get to focus. And then on the coaching side, because of where tools were, for the longest time, the way you coach with video is you get the entire team into a classroom and then you go through different things, right? You choose certain moments that you think will be instructive to each player. And the analogy that I make to everyone is, if your son was having trouble in math class, would you sign them up for another 20-person math class, or would you get them a private tutor? What's the answer?
Bingo, bingo, right?
Yeah,
it's like
you get them a private tutor, but that just wasn't possible, right? Being a soccer coach and going through and cutting every moment for every single player, that would take you 20, 30, 40 hours. But with Trace, it's automated and it comes back to you, hours after the game. So we have coaches now who just take one or two players out during warm up and they say, hey, let's go through your moments and let's see what you're doing well and what you're doing poorly. For the first time, you can really have personalize private tutoring the same way you do with math, or the same way you do with history, or the same way you do with English. And you can do it on a massive scale with soccer. So we have coaches who every single month, they've taken each player aside and done a 15-minute personalized video review. And so we're changing the conversation, and we're changing the dynamic around how people think about video. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to be a professional video editor. You don't have to be a professional photographer, videographer. You just let a computer do it. And Trace designs that computer, and you sort of sit back and watch the show.
Oh, fantastic. Now, again, I know not everything goes to plan. So if I asked you what really threw you for a loop and you went, whoa, time to rethink this, what happened?
I think early on, you read all of these articles about companies and they go to the moon overnight, right? And for us, it just seemed, I've said this theme a couple of times, it just seems so obvious that this was a good idea, that people would want personalized video of themselves without having to put in any work. And I just didn't understand why we weren't getting traction, right? We couldn't monetize it. We couldn't get people to, we can get funding. It was just hard, really hard to build the business, even though the technology seemed so obvious. And I'm not going to lie, there were a few moments in there, a lot of moments in there where I thought, well, maybe this will never work. And this actually isn't a good idea. To be 8 years into it and not be able to make any money just seems like, well, the world is telling you something. This isn't as good of an idea as you think it is. And thankfully, we didn't listen to those voices in the back of our heads. I have my co-founder, Anatol, my dad, to really thank for that. And I think leaning on each other and leaning on the team that we had brought in and built around Trace, I really can't say enough about the employees that we have and the team that we built and the culture that's been sustained. I think that part makes it really easy, because waking up and going to work, working with all these people, it's awesome. It's my favorite thing to do.
Wow, that was a message that I needed to hear. And for all those other entrepreneurs out there, don't give up, right? Keep trying. Product market fit is hard to find, but once you do, boom, you're on fire.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, there were plenty of moments in those 8 years where we could have given up.
Now, on the topic of giving up and what's going on, if I asked you and said, David, what's your kryptonite? What takes you out at the knees?
You're asking very good, very challenging questions. I'm sorry for taking so long.
No, feel free to take the time. It's what our audience wants to know. They want the inside story, because it's not all straight to the top and like, woohoo, party, we're ringing the bell on Wall Street. We've got this massive IPO and we're all gazillionaires. That's not the story of entrepreneurship.
I think there are two things that come to mind. And the first is probably something that you hear pretty often, which is just other outsiders undervaluing the idea. When someone just doesn't get why this is obviously going to be a very good, very large business. And that definitely takes a chip off the shoulder and puts it in the pocket. But I think the bigger piece that just gets me so upset, and I don't think it's kryptonite, in some ways it's a motivator, is when I look at the product or I see a situation with a customer and realize that we really haven't focused on the customer in that situation, that no company can sustain a life without customers, right? They're life and blood, and it's something at Trace that we really, really focus on. We're also not perfect, and we're moving a million miles a minute, and sometimes we do things that don't have a focus on the customer, and that's where you just sort of do a 180, reverse it, make it right, and make sure that you do focus on the customer. That's something that we talk a lot about at Trace. Is they don't care how awesome our AI is. They don't care how great our engineering team is. They don't care how our office looks or what problems we're dealing with internally. They care about seeing their son or daughter, or they care about coaching a certain player. And if we're not delivering that to them, and if we're not delivering that experience to them, then we're not focusing on the right things. And at Trace, we have a value focus on what matters. And the customer is first and foremost.
Excellent. I was going to ask you if you had a founder undo button, but I think there's a lot of wisdom already in that. Stay focused on the customer, right? Focus, focus, focus.
Yep.
Now, last question. It's our signature question. It's a little bit fun. If we looked into your closet and there was a pair of footwear there that represented you, your personality, What are we looking at? And why is that pair of footwear? Does that describe David Lokshin of Trace?
I'd say a pair of rainbow sandals. Cali born and raised, so definitely the rainbow sandals are a sign of California, but it also is the minimum amount of material required to make just a very functional, very sturdy piece of footwear. I've gone hiking in them. I've scrambled up and down cliffs on them. They never break, they never let you down, and they last forever. So I'd say a pair of rainbow sandals.
Fantastic. All right. With that, thank you very much, David Lokshin, founder of Trace. Thank you so much for coming to our show today here at the Grit Files. And we wish you continued success bringing all these memories to so many parents and coaches.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Absolutely great questions. And thank you for having us.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?